Hello and welcome back to the series of lectures on pot ornamentals. Today we will talk about a plant known as Fuchsia. Now, in terms of its age and history, this is one of the oldest pot ornamentals cultivated throughout the world. Ordinarily, this plant has been named after an explorer, a plant botanist known as Leonhard Fuchs. Leonhard Fuchs was a South American explorer who accidentally discovered this plant in the wild habitats, especially in those conditions wherein the plant is continuously exposed to sunny conditions, but the temperature does not reach the extremities of highness or coldness. It has been seen that up till the Columbian discovery of America, this plant was not introduced either into Europe or into Old World, that is Asia. It is said that after the discovery of the American continent, this plant was introduced into the Old World, and in these areas, its cultivation as an ornamental, especially initially as a field ornamental and subsequently as a pot ornamental, was developed. Generally, this plant has two important characters. One, it has a potential to either survive as a pot herb or sometimes even can survive as a field shrub or even a field bush. That means its characters as well as its habitat and habit in turn show tremendous variability. In general, as far as the number of species of this plant are concerned, so far about 100 have been discovered and almost all of them are used as pot ornamentals. But primarily, the selection of these pot ornamentals depends upon not only the survival pattern of the plant but also the size as well as the decorative value of the flowers. As you can see here, this plant actually has flowers which are produced in different colors, but mainly their basic character is that they are always drooping downwards. Again, you can see the flower droops downwards, and the color that it develops in turn actually facilitates its ornamental value much more. Generally, this plant can survive under varied extremities of climate. That means sometimes in tropics, sometimes in temperate, sometimes in alpine, sometimes even in alpine conditions. However, the problem is that during its domestication as well as ornamental cultivation, some important characters or some important factors are to be followed. Generally, it has two basic requirements. One, what the type of the substrate it needs. That means if we grow it as a pot ornamental or as a field ornamental, in that case, its habitat should have an important composition of sand as well as loam. Again, you can see mixing the sand and loam together. That in turn reveals that its habit actually prefers those areas wherein the habitat has tremendous evaporative mechanisms operated. That means where the seepage of moisture as well as evaporation is continuously taking place. Now, if we cultivate it as a pot ornamental, in that case, in the pots that we use, the basic requirement is to fill up almost 50% of the sand and 50% of the soil so that the mixture in turn facilitates not only absorptive potential but also facilitates the evaporation of excessive moisture if and when added. Generally, this plant has a potential to survive even in pots for a longer duration. That means it's a perennial. However, the maintenance of these pots, especially in temperate and cold areas, is essential in the hot houses or pot houses during winter. That means the essential requirement of the hot temperatures is met by creation of such structures. Generally, if this plant is cultivated in those areas where temperature during summer reaches extreme conditions, that means say temperature is too high, in those areas it needs almost daily or sometimes even irrigation at alternate intervals. That means after 1 or 2 days. That irrigation in turn facilitates not only survival of the plant but also maintained its productive quality. In general, after collecting the plant and trying to cultivate it as an ornamental, the pot after being prepared is in need of being provided excessive quantities of moisture so that the soil in which we plant this plant as such is moist and wet. Again, you can see here, after seeing that soil, the plant is as such added, that means along with its root deposited in that soil, and at the time of deposition or plantation, it is in need of providing excessive quantities of moisture so that the soil around the roots remains continuously moist till it starts to show signs of adaptability. Now at this stage, generally, till the new foliage, that means when the new leaves start developing, this is to be kept in shady conditions. But as soon as the vegetative bud or the leaf or sometimes even branchlets start developing, again you can see here, this plant is to be taken out and kept under open sunny conditions so that its evaporative mechanism as well as its adaptability gets facilitated. Generally, it has been seen that in temperate areas like northern parts of India including Kashmir, this plant is to be taken into open habitats or into sunny conditions in the months of May or sometimes if it is hotter in the months of April itself. However, if we talk about tropical areas, that means where the temperature in the months of March also is high, in those areas in the March itself this plant is to be taken out. However, the basic need is that in the month of March that area or the tropical area is in need of providing irrigation in a properly maintained manner, while as in summer it needs irrigation regularly. It has been seen that after we take it out from the stored condition, that means either hothouse, polyhouse or the greenhouse, we take it into field conditions. In that condition, generally the productive potential or the ornamental value of the plant may not show immediate positive signs. It is basically because of the fact that to adapt to sunny conditions, to adapt to hot conditions, it takes roughly estimated 7 to 15 days for a plant. Generally, after this first period, the development of new foliage as well as the floral bud formation, that means once the development of flowers takes place, is actually reflecting that the plant is getting adapted in the sunny conditions. Again, you can see here some of the buds have formed and some of the flowers have opened up. And once the bud formation and flower opening starts, at that stage, one has to regularly monitor not only development of these flowers but also the development of branches as well as the foliage. If any branch or any leaf is showing any sign of senescence, that is sign of drying up, again you can see here there is an immediate need of cutting these off so that it does not in any way hamper the survival pattern as well as the quality of the ornamental. Once this plant shows adaptability as well as survival, at that stage it has been seen that the number of flower production as well as the quality of these flowers in terms of size as well as color variation can be maintained provided the irrigation as well as the nutrient supply is regularly monitored. Generally, in this particular plant, there is a need of adding of the fertilizers usually at a period of 15 to around 20 days so that that fertilizer in turn is able to facilitate not only the survival of the plant but also the survival as well as production of the flowers. Again you can see even during peak flowering season some fertilizers are added and these fertilizers in turn facilitate the survival as well as the development potential of this plant. Generally, the quantity of the fertilizer that is to be added is essentially dependent upon the size of the plant. If the plant is smaller, again you can see here, the quantity of the nutrients that is to be added, usually the inorganic nutrients, urea and NPK, is much smaller than ordinarily added to a pot or a plant which is slightly taller. Generally, for smaller plants, half a spoon of nutrients is added and evenly sprinkled around the whole pot. Again, you can see here, and then irrigation is carried out. But if we have a taller plant, wherein the size of the plant as well as the number of branches and the density of foliage is higher, in that case usually 1 spoonful of these inorganic nutrients is added and evenly spread around the whole pot. Again you can see here, so that the distribution of these nutrients is common throughout. Now in this case again, after addition of the nutrients, there is a need of providing irrigation, but in this case, that is when we add nutrients either in a small size plant or a tall size plant, the addition of irrigation or addition of water is to be continued for a period of roughly about 7 days. That means if the nutrient has been added on Monday, up to next Monday, it is to be regularly irrigated so that the nutrients get dissolved in the substratum and that in turn is properly used by the plant. this addition has been seen to play a direct role not only in maintaining the quality but also improving the quantity of the production. That means the number of flowers throughout the growing season per plant is higher. However, one thing one must bear in mind here is that we will never find more than 2 flowers born together. Again, you can see here only 2 flowers are born together, but the number of flowers the plant is producing is much higher. That means technically we can say that the flower production is usually in pairs, and this pair production actually is dependent upon the amount of nutrients as well as the method of irrigation that we have followed. Further, during the growing season, if the irrigation has sometimes caused a negative effect wherein the soil around the root, around the main axis, again you can see, becomes harder. In that case, there is a need to dig it up so that the soil texture around the root gets loosened up. Again, you can see here, soil around the main axis or the root is getting loosened up, and in this case, it is initially allowed to dry up for a day so that excessive moisture quantity gets evaporated, and then on the next day after it has dried up, we try to add the water. That means in this case, the accumulation of the moisture or excessive moisture in the pot itself can prove drastically harmful not only to the plant itself but also may also negatively affect its ornamental value. Now, once this plant has started to reach a productive stage, that means it is now used for decorative or ornamental purposes, it has been seen that its production as well as quality can be maintained right from the day of first flower formation up to the period when the flower formation, that means the development of the inflorescence or the opening of the flowers, does not take place. Roughly estimated from the month of March up to the month of September or even some cases October, this flower continues and this bud formation continues. However, if at that stage, either in tropical or in temperate areas, there is any sudden decline in temperature, that means in the month of October or in September itself, we find that the flower as such or sometimes even the buds do not show the proper signs of development. That means there are chances that the plant itself may show the non-survival patterns so that it is in need of shifting towards either proper storage conditions or to be provided specific amount of water or irrigation so that it does not actually get killed because of the lowness of temperature. Generally, in temperate areas, at the end of the flowering phase, that means in the month of September or sometimes even in the month of October, these pots as such are collected and then stored under the specific conditions of hothouse, polyhouse or even in the greenhouse. However, if we try to cultivate it under tropical conditions in that area, even the specific requirements are to be met wherein the same pots are to be shifted from the open fields into specific conditions where they do not get directly exposed to extremities of the habitat or the climatic conditions. Generally, it has been seen that in stored conditions, that means in temperate as well as in tropical areas, the irrigation pattern is to be monitored so that excessive quantity of irrigation does not in any way hamper the survival as well as the productive potential of this plant. Generally, in the temperate areas, that means areas like northern parts of India, including Kashmir, we have to provide it irrigation at prolonged intervals from 7, sometimes even 15-day intervals, wherein in case of tropical areas, usually the irrigation is provided during winter at an interval of say 3, sometimes even 4 days, but not greater than that. That means the requirement of irrigation is dependent upon the conditions in which we store it. Generally, this plant under controlled condition can survive for as long as we want. However, that survival in turn may be seen to drastically affect its ornamental production. That means the number of flowers produced by a plant as well as their size as well as color variation may get hampered. That means any such sign, that means where the plant does not survive properly or does not produce proper branches or proper number of flowers or proper color of flowers, at that stage it reflects that the habitat or the pot itself is playing a negative role in its survival. At that stage, again, the same practice of pot ornamentals is followed. The plant is dug out from the pot and whatever development in the roots has taken place, that is analyzed. If root development is dominant. That means where the terminal roots are touching the peripheral portion of the pot, that touching indicates that the root size is much above what the pot itself can sustain, which in turn is proving negative to the survival of the plant. In this case, again, what is done is, after digging out the plant from the pot, excessive size of the roots is cut off and the plant is replanted either in the same pot or in a different pot, so that not only its survival pattern but also its ornamental quality has been improved. Generally, this has been seen that the requirement of this cutting or the root cutting is essential to be carried out at an interval of 3 or sometimes, if possible, at an interval of 2 years only. That means a plant pot can survive only for a period of 2 years unless and until we try to regularly cut off excessive development of the roots. That means its survival can be facilitated for longer durations by pruning the excessive development of the roots. Now, in this case, it has been seen that these root cuttings as such can be successfully used for vegetative propagation purposes. Now, generally, if we want to vegetatively propagate it, there are two methods. One, either to cut the main axis into parts and each cutting in turn replanted as normal method of vegetative propagation, but sometimes if we cut off the root and divide it vertically into two pieces, grow these two parts separately, each cutting in turn will give rise to a new plant. However, if during the cutting of excessive size of the roots, whatever rootlets have dropped out or whatever have been thrown away, these rootlets in turn can sometimes have a potential to develop into new plants, which are sometimes referred to as vegetative propagules. Now that means the method is standardized not only for vegetative propagation but sometimes even during the transplantation of these pot plants from one pot into another and cutting of the excessive roots. That means we can use vegetative propagation not only maintaining these plants for longer duration but also multiplying their numbers. However, in some areas where the plant is not able to produce these vegetative propagules in larger numbers in terms of size as well as the width, in that case, the seed propagation has been seen also suitable. That means we collect the seeds as and when they are formed, and then these seeds in turn are in need of storage at a proper level of storage conditions wherein the temperature does not increase beyond 25 or sometimes even 30 degrees Celsius. That means if we cultivate this plant in tropical areas, in that case, this seed is to be stored under low temperature conditions, while as in temperate areas, after harvesting the seeds, we can store it under normal conditions in which we cultivate this plant. Usually, this seed has a potential to be stored for as long as we want, provided its productive potential as well as its viability remains intact. And generally, in tropical areas, if we collected it in the month of November this year, next year it is to be sown in the month of April for its normal propagation. However, in temperate areas, this seed can be stored for a period roughly from 2 to 5 years, provided its moisture content remains proper for the survival of the embryo. Generally, after collection of these seeds, they are in need of drying, and after drying, they can be stored, and at the time of sowing, there is one basic requirement to prepare specific conditions in a pot itself in which we cultivate these seeds. Again, you can see here a special type of a pot for the seed cultivation or seed germination has been developed, and in this pot, generally, basal part of the soil is composition of clay and sand, but the top of that is usually clay, and on top of it, these seeds are thinly spread out so that each seed in turn is covered by a thin layer of sand. These pots in which we grow these seeds are irrigated, and this irrigation is carried out in a proper manner so that these seeds do not get exposed. Generally, first irrigation is usually maintained for a period till the first signs of seedling development are shown. Again, you can see here a couple of seedlings have developed, and these seedlings in turn reflect that the seed that has been sown is actually reached a stage wherein its ability or its production protocol to produce a new ornamental plant has been attained. At this stage, these seedlings are to be irrigated at specific intervals, generally weekly intervals, so that this irrigation does not in any way hamper the development of these plants. Again, one more thing that is important here is that if the seedlings are too dense, again you can see here, if they are too dense, sometimes some of the excessive number of seedlings are to be dug out so that the major healthy seedlings are in a position to give rise to more important commercially useful ornamental plants. Generally, they may start appearing in the month of April itself or sometimes even May, and in the month of June or sometimes in the month of July, these seedlings reach a level wherein they can be transplanted as such either into the field or, if and when desired, into the pots. That means we can use these as pot ornamentals as well as field ornamentals. But when we try to transplant these, general concept that is to be followed is that if the pot is kept in sunny conditions, it is in need of being provided protective shade so that the seedlings are able to adapt to new habitat. But in case we try to grow it in a natural habitat, that means in a flower bed, in that case again we have to either have a natural shady condition or, even when desired, we have to create an artificial shady condition. This shady condition actually facilitates the adaptability as well as development of these seedlings. Generally, in pots, it has been seen that this seedling attains a productive stage within a span of 3, sometimes 6 months, depending upon the quality of the substrate as well as the quality of the seedling. That means if we have sown the seedling this year, maybe by the months of September or even October, the same seedling may attain a potential of reaching a level of production, that means of producing flowers. However, if the seedling is small, there is a need of maintaining these seedlings in proper conditions during winter so that they survive, and next year these seedlings, either in the pot or in proper conditions, is then kept in open conditions wherein they will become important ornamentals. Generally, the productive potential of this plant, either as a pot ornamental or as a field ornamental, has been seen can be maintained for desired durations depending upon what type of the plant itself or what quality of the plant it has. Generally, under tropical areas, as I told you, there are 100 different species. Many different cultivars have been developed because of its adaptability. But their survival in tropical areas is not as good as the survival of the same plant in temperate areas is. That means the plant, even though adaptable to tropical areas, but its production there as well as quality there is not as good as it is in temperate areas. That is why you will find that whatever temperate area is in that area, whether as a commercial ornamental or as a domestic ornamental or sometimes even as a decorative plant, its survival, its quality as well as its productive potential is maintained for desired durations. One more important aspect about this plant is that sometimes if we want to trade it, that means a commercial cultivators want to trade this plant as such, two important methods have been developed. One is to either as such transport across states or across even zones, sometimes even across countries, a seedling in polybags. Again, you can see a seedling of a plant in a polybag is actually purchased from the market, which has come not from the state itself but sometimes even across the state. But if we want to use the other method, that means where we use other proper use like seeds, etc., we can sometimes even trade or exchange seeds of desired varieties or cultivars across states, across zones, sometimes even across countries or even continents. It has been seen that in that trade, generally speaking, one should always monitor what type of the seed or what color of the seed or what variety of the plant he has used and what methods or what requirements are essential for the cultivation as well as the maintenance of that. That means during trade, whosoever cultivates this ornamental, he has to actually transport with that whatever desired information the cultivator or commercial producer will need. That means the ornamental is not becoming simply a product for cultivation at home for decorative purposes. This has also become an important plant wherein its usage as such can be a basic of revenue. That means we can trade it across states, across countries as well as across continents. Generally speaking, this plant, even though dominantly cultivated in temperate areas, has been seen at present commercially being cultivated as well as traded in tropical areas, but wherein always one fundamental requirement is that one should always provide a guideline to the cultivator, whether it is domestic or commercial, as to what parameters or methods he should follow for its cultivation. meaning thereby that if we want to cultivate it for domestic purposes, one standard method, for commercial purposes another standard method, but for exchange purposes, that means trade across countries and continents, in that case proper guidelines should be followed, meaning thereby that Fuchsia as such can also become an landmark in not only developing techniques but also using it for the cultivation for commercial purposes. I hope that all of those who are watching this and are interested in commercial cultivation will develop a protocol not only for its cultivation but also for its exchange to areas or to countries or continents wherein its demand is much higher than where it is cultivated. Thank you.